want to thank everybody for being here this evening for our June 7th regularly called school board meeting. At this time, I will ask Ms. Kinzer to call the roll.
Ms. Parker. Ms. Kinzer's here. Mr. Harlan. Mr. Fulbright.
Here.
Mr. Moore. Ms. Irvin. Mr. Sims.
Here.
Mr. Hooper.
Here.
Mr. Howell.
Here.
Mr. Lindsay. And Mr. Dudley. We have a quorum.
All right, good deal. At this time, let's please stand. We'll say the pledge and have a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. This time I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda, or we can make any changes to the agenda if necessary. Mr. Sims.
I would like to move 6.25 off of consent.
And that is the Code of Conduct, Code of Behavior and Discipline.
Yes, sir.
Okay? We'll take that up under policy, which is going to be new business number 4. Any other adjustments to the agenda? Have a motion from Mr. Lindsay to approve with that change. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moore. Any further discussion on the agenda as presented and as amended? Seeing none, I think we're ready. Ms. Parker.
Can I ask one question? Seeing as how some of those discipline policies feed into some of the other ones that are still on consent, is that like a holistic approach, or do we need to look at all of those individually, or just the code of conduct?
That's a good question. I'd like to ask Ms. Gerard, if we're pulling that one, do we also need to look at 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31? Taking those off consent as a package? I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't, but...
Some of them do feed into the, and is it, 6.300, is that the one that was the Code of Behavior and Discipline? Okay.
Should we just go ahead and take all of those 6.3s off of consent and deal with them all together?
You can, I think as far as numbers 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30 probably all tie in. I don't think the 31 use of personal devices necessarily feeds into that, but it could.
We'll just
all policies can relate to one another.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Let's just do all those 25 through 31 is my recommendation. Mr. Sims, is that okay with you? Mr. Lindsay, Mr. Moore? All right, so everybody's good with that. We're going to take off of consent those 7 policies and discuss them under the policy segment of new business. Any other questions on the agenda? Seeing none, I believe we're ready to vote.
Please vote now.
All right. The agenda passes unanimously. This time, I would like the Spring Hill Band members who are here to come forward. Come on, don't be shy. Mr. Mitchell actually emailed me to let me know that he would not be here tonight. Let me read some of the things that he wrote about you guys. Make sure everybody can see you. So, it's the biggest thing. Let everybody see y'all. The band attended the Middle Tennessee Band and Orchestra Association Concert Performance Assessment back in March. They were scored by 3 judges and received superior ratings in every category by all 3 judges. This is called Superior with Distinction. It is a very high honor, and very few bands are able to achieve this level. So I want to say personally, as a band parent, congratulations. I know how hard y'all work, the effort that goes into the studies, not only music, but the muscle memory and discipline, and just the time that you have to commit to reach those kind of levels. You all should be very proud. Spring Hill should be very proud, and Murray County should be very proud of what all y'all have accomplished. So with that said, turn around so these people can see you. They don't want to see the back of your heads. Thank you very much. And let's get a quick picture with Mr. Cobb. He's running around with the camera and doesn't have anything else to do. So if y'all could pose for him. Good job, y'all. We're really proud of you, and keep up the good work. Thank you all very much. All right, and I have another note that we have someone with perfect attendance from kindergarten through 12th grade, which I have to say, I'm impressed. Don't tell me they don't have perfect attendance tonight.
If I may, real quick.
Nonetheless, it is quite an honor, so I'll let you talk about that a little bit.
It is, absolutely. This is a skill, obviously, that cannot be taught, comes from the heart, and I'll reach out to this family, make sure they get a very nice plaque that we had made for them, as well as a certificate, but I will let them know that I'm sure Ms. Ventura, Chair Fulbright, or any board member, for that matter, as well as myself, would be willing to write a letter of recommendation just based on their perfect attendance, K through 12, for any type of job. So,
well, and I would also say, let them also know that they're invited back to receive their recognition at any future board meeting.
Absolutely.
I definitely want to add that it's a dedication on behalf of the student, but it's also a dedication on behalf of the family and the parents. So make sure that they understand that we appreciate all the work that they've done and all the dedication they've shown. So
yes,
thank
sir.
you for doing that.
Thank you.
Has anybody, Mr. Cobb, would you look to see if anybody signed up in the back for public delegation? Okay. All right. Ms. Inc., would you like to come up now or when the MOU comes up on the agenda? I'll give you the choice. Okay, good. I was actually going to recommend that, and then that way if we have any questions or anything comes up in the meantime, we'll call you. But yes, if you wouldn't mind speaking on behalf of the MOU.
Chair Fulbright, Ms. Ventura, and Board, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just want to speak in support of and hope that the Board will support the MOU that between 10 and 15 people worked on a regular basis for about 2 months, spent hours putting together, having lively discussions, cooperative, meaningful discussions about the state of education in Murray County and what we can do to recruit and retain highly qualified teachers. I understand that there is a board policy in place. There are board policies in place and procedures. However, this goes far beyond that, and it does a little extra to try to make teachers feel supported, encouraged, and basically appreciated for the time and effort they put in. There are the things that we put in there, the items we put in there, the additions we added were well thought out and based on data we collected in a survey of over 450 plus teachers responded to that I provided you with last time. I would just ask that you all consider supporting that, the new MOU and the changes in it as we worked hard to come up with that. And I think it would be another addition to the raise that we received that has kept a lot of teachers here. I think it would be an additional incentive for some teachers to stay, given some of the things we added to that MOU. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to staff reporting. Staff, do you have anything to report? Okay. Thank you very much. We have, the next item are our consent items on the agenda, rather. Have a motion to approve from Mr. Moore, seconded by Mr. Howell, and I will remind everyone that we did pull items 25 through 31 through our amending of the agenda. Is there any further discussion on the consent items? Seeing none, I believe we're ready to vote. All right, consent agenda passes unanimously. Also want to make note that Ms. Irvin has joined the meeting at this time. Good to have you. No problem. Under new business, financial and budget amendments. Mr. Laconin, turn it over to you.
Good evening, board members. We have 5 budget amendments on the agenda. 4 of those budget amendments are for summer school camps, our bridge camp, stream camp, summer learning camp, and then the final budget amendment for camps is to fund transportation. And then we have a revision to the ESSER 2.0 budget amendment, which was revised to include case assessment. So we just shuffled those funds, no additional funds there. So just a correction on that budget amendment, and I would ask for your approval on these.
Okay. Any discussion on the, Ms. Kinzer? Have a motion from Ms. Kinzer, second by Mr. Sims. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, I believe we're ready to vote. Is it posted yet? Did that pass unanimously, I'm assuming? I was looking down. It may have flashed up there. I didn't see it. Okay. We're good then. You don't have to pull it back up. I was enamored with this next item on our agenda, the end of the year meeting for cleanup and budget amendments. Mr. Laconin.
So we have to schedule one of those. So we're looking at June 29th. That is a date we have been discussing. We do have one that we've notified the commission already for the June 30th date to accept any amendments that we would clean up on the 29th. But that's what I would like to propose to the school board. Gives us a chance to get all of our final invoices in by putting it that late, and also getting as accurate of a cleanup as we can. So.
Does anybody have a problem with doing it at 6 o'clock on the 29th? Okay.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
It seems we have 2 inactive members, so it puts us down to 9. I know I'm out of town that week, so that puts you guys at 8. You still have to get 6 votes, and I just say that it's important that at least 6 people show up that night. If not, no business can be done. So,
Mr. Laconin?
I would echo that because if we don't get it amended and we have to send something forward, it could mean an audit finding for the school district.
Are we able to get 6 people here on the 30th? 29th. Let's do it the 29th, the right date. Mr. Lindsay will not be here. It is a Wednesday evening. We good? I think we can pull 6 people together. If not, I'll go pick somebody up at their house and bring them over. Yeah, we'll send Mr. Howell and his blue lights after you. All right, instructional under new business. All right, did you have anything else, Mr. Laconin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good deal. All right, instructional. Mr. Gaines, anything? Nothing? Operations, Mr. Perriman.
Mr. Favard, all we have are the 2 proposed budgets that we were asked to present to you at the work session, and I'll just leave that for your discussion.
Okay. We have two budget amendments from the operations side. I have a motion to get the discussion started. Not seeing any motion?
Yeah.
Are you making a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Lindsay's making a motion. Who's gonna second it?
Well, and we don't,
Well,
we don't really have a budget amendment in front of us, do we?
not the budget amendment, the proposed budgets. I'm sorry if that was confusing.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we take $5 million out of fund balance, to be equally divided between major maintenance items and athletic facilities.
Okay. Thank you for catching that. Is there a second to that motion? From Mr. Howell, there's a second. Discussion. Sorry for the confusion calling it a budget amendment, but is there anything, Mr. Perriman, that you would like to see discussed or like to add to the conversation?
No, sir, I think we touched on everything at the work session.
Okay. Mr. Sims?
Mr. Lindsay, just to clarify your motion, you said 5 million to be split equally between that, so 2.5 to athletics, 2.5 to major maintenance. Okay.
And is that still your second on that, Mr. Howell? Okay.
Yeah,
Mr. Lindsay?
And my intention on that would be that they've presented us with two lists of projects. Staff would, start at the top, work their way till the money runs out, so.
Okay. Any further discussion? I think I asked this last time, and I'll ask it again. Is there any provision on this list at all for Whitthorne baseball? I know we've had that discussion, but I just want to know.
Just right now, we're looking to manage Whitthorne baseball as far as actual games with Central and with any other facility that we would have to mandate. Mr. Pointer and I have talked about some upgrades that we could do to their practice facilities, and those are on our list, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed to hear. Any other conversation? And you did clarify that this would come out of fund balance, correct? Okay. Mr. Lacona?
I do think the board should vote for a specific budget amendment. We can attach that after the fact. I can just say the line items tonight and get that on the record for you all and build the budget amendment, have it go with the minutes and all that good stuff. I would make it very general. It would be out of a 799 line item, or we can send a budget amendment to the work session because of this vote. But I mean, if we're taking it out of fund balance, we need to go ahead and put it into the maintenance line items and the athletic department's line items. So we would take it out of fund balance, but I can specify those expenditure accounts generally right now, if that is the will of the board.
Okay, I'm seeing heads going up and down. All right.
Okay, we would go with 2.5 million out of 141,72120,799, and then 2.5 million out of 141,72620,799. That's maintenance department.
Okay.
So, and then 5 million out of fund balance 141,399,000.
How does this leave us with our fund balance number?
This is about, if you had other things that you wanted to plan for out of fund balance that you would take, I would wait a while and see how things play out when you're taking this amount out. I think we'll be okay if we take this amount out of fund balance, but we would need to go ahead and continuously evaluate our numbers, you know, to see if we could take more out for other projects past today's date.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ventura?
Mr. Lacona, how close will you be to giving us an exact figure on the 29th?
Of how we're gonna finish?
Yes.
I'd be within a couple 100,000.
That's what I was going to say. I
Yeah.
mean, if we need to, because that will be a special call to go through those budget amendments,
Mhm.
we can definitely prepare something that firms something up for the board
Mhm.
for that meeting so that you can see where we're actually putting the money.
Yeah, we could take a more detailed approach rather than just dropping it in 799 line items, and I would yield to the superintendent and the board on that decision.
Give that some thought. Mr. Lindsay?
Just a comment, but looking at financials today, and Doug can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to use rough numbers. Today, we're $9 million better today than we were at this same day last year. We took $4 million out of fund balance last year. Today, where we sit today, we're $9 million better, and I think June 29th, I think Mr. Luconen will probably tell us that we're even better off than that when we look at what our actual expenditures will be.
Okay. Do you have a Ms. Irvin?
Sorry, I was just going to ask. I'm sure this is just for naught, but this is already including like what we've considered with the teachers, all of that, because I know we were going to be operating on that deficit. So Doug, that's including that already taken out. And okay, I do know, and I may be getting ahead of myself, but in the memorandum of understanding that we're going to be voting on shortly, and Mr. Fulbright, you can correct me, there was some, I mean, they're just minor things, but there are some things that potentially could have a cost to that too that we've not yet thought about as well. So, do we have any clue like where that would leave us in our fund balance if we did do the $5 million?
Yeah, I know where we'd be at if we did the $5 million, but the impact of the MOU is very flexible. It just depends on how much those provisions are used in the MOU when it comes to travel. But yeah, ballpark figure, we would be okay. I can get you a specific. I don't look at today's fund balance. I really don't care about today's fund balance. What I look at is where is our low point? Where are we going to struggle to make payroll? And so I really pay attention to September and October of last year, and our low point when I got here was below $3 million. It was around $2 million, and our payroll for a month is going to cost us around $9 million. So, you know, that's a very scary situation to put your district in. But last year our low point was 6.5 after those payrolls were run. So, you know, I do think we're going to be okay. I look at this frequently. Our office looks at this frequently. We are, for once, Wayne's numbers equal Doug's numbers tonight. But he's correct. You know, we have part of the reason why we have this is because we are struggling to fill positions, and we're hoping that the investment this board has made, you know, fixes that problem. And if it does, things are going to start spending pretty quickly. So we're going to keep an eye on it. I'm fine with $5 million. I think we'll be safe, plenty safe with $5 million. The impact of the MOU is kind of a moving number, moving target. It just depends on how much those new things are utilized. So, but I don't see it being an expensive endeavor. So.
Thank you. Just for some clarification, I think of what Ms. Ventura and Mr. Luconen were saying, we can go ahead and take a vote to approve these two proposed budgets and then vote to approve a detailed budget amendment on the 29th. Does that sound agreeable to what the board has thought? Mr. Lindsay.
This question, if a budget is not passed by the county commission and back, we can't amend a continuation budget, correct?
You can't amend it, but it would be committed by this. It would be committed by this board as a carryover item. So we would still be able to move forward with the project. It would just, we'd have the brakes on a little bit in July.
I was going to say, this would be amending actually this current year's budget, would it not?
It goes off the original, the continuation budget law.
But if we pass it before July 1st?
That's an amended budget. You've amended your original budget. So you only get to start next year with last year's starting budget. So any amendments that we've made, you know, but the thing about that is it does give the maintenance department and the athletics department leeway in their own budget to continue to do that, to continue on those projects, and then when they get the funding in there, you know, we can maintain it
We're not
that
gonna
way.
have all the invoices come in first part of
No.
July anyway.
But just remember.
And I do expect that if things go well this month with budget meetings, I expect that we could have a budget back from the state as early August, maybe late July, so.
But we just have to remember that taking money out of fund balance is not officially approved until the county commission approves that.
Right.
So, we could vote to do it tonight. They would have it on their agenda on the third Monday of this month. If we wait after the third Monday, then we prolong it. Now we're in the next fiscal year. So
do we still wanna do it the way that we just discussed, where can they vote? Is it binding if they are just voting on a proposed budget rather than the budget amendments themselves?
The school board or the county commission?
County commission.
This wouldn't even go forward to the county commission if there's
Until
not
it
a
became
budget
a budget amendment, okay.
Right, and, to follow up on that, if you do it to $7.99 and you all wanna bring it back and you wanna change it and divvy it out and make it more specific, you have that option. It would just, be a lot more general on the front end when we bring it back, because we'll have to bring this money back out of fund balance, because we're not gonna spend any of it in 5 days, or 1 day. So, you know, we're gonna have to bring it back out of fund balance, and when we do that amendment, we can be specific with our amendment in the new fiscal year. And that'll come before the board to divvy that out. So, you can make it detailed both ways. You can do it on the front end, or you can do it on the back end. Either way is fine, so.
Mr. Lindsey,
Mr.
what
Fulbright.
are you feeling?
Mr. Fulbright,
Name.
we
Yeah.
ran out of $7.99 this year on both of those as the loan item. It was not divided out across multiple lines.
Oh, okay.
It was just
Okay.
placed in $7.99 and used as a fund out of that. So
Okay.
that would be consistent with what you did this year.
Mr. LaCola?
And there's nothing, wrong about that. The audit wouldn't care. As long as it's a capital thing and it's in 700, they're good.
Okay. Mr. Lindsey?
I'm happy to move forward with Mr. Luke Conan's, advice, moving both of those into 799, respectively for each department. That just gives staff the freedom to know that, hey, we're gonna do this. They can go ahead and get to work on that, and they're not, if we don't pass it tonight and the county commission doesn't pass it, then they're on hold. They're waiting on us, so.
Can we then pass this as a budget amendment tonight? Is that what we're talking, is that kinda where we're at? Is that a board feel good? Okay. So then what I'm hearing is our motion is to do a budget amendment, 2 budget amendments actually, for athletic capital projects and then also major maintenance budget proposal, 2.5 each? Or would it be one?
It can be one amendment.
Okay, we'll make it
Yeah.
one amendment at $5 million, based off of Mr. Conan's advice.
And, the line items would be 141-72120-799. That's for athletics for $2.5 million. The next one for maintenance would be 141-72620-799 for $2.5 million. And then, the 141 fund balance for $5 million.
Okay. Any further discussion? Is it clear as to where we're going with this and what we're doing? All right, then, just for my own clarification, Mr. Laconin, we're on the hook for our budget deficit coming out of, being covered by fund balance. How does this affect the fact that the county commission has asked us to have a deficit budget covered by our own fund balance?
It puts us in a sticky situation probably for next year as far as, us balancing our budget with our fund balance, because if it comes to a point in which we can't pass our 3% test by doing that, the state would reject our budget, which would be the first time in, forever. I've never been around for that, and I've never heard a comptroller's office turning down a budget for that reason, but it could happen. And it's what they, tell us. We can balance our budget with anything above our 3% test. Well, this particular situation puts us within $500,000 of that 3% test. So if our sales tax goes up more than $500,000, we come to a 3% test dilemma as far as our budget. So we can only balance our budget with our fund balance up to that point, and then we would need to budget in revenue, whatever we would need to make up that difference. So that it's not really so much this year that we would get into this situation. It's more about next year. So
that's what I'm concerned about with all this, cover the deficit out of your fund balance. I don't, did we not get a second? I thought we got a second on that. No, yeah, Mr. Howe seconded. Yeah, 'cause I kept turning to ask. Yeah, I should have remembered that. All right, I don't see any other lights on for conversation. $5 million budget amendment to cover these two proposed budgets. I believe we're ready to vote. All right, that one passes. Oh. Okay. Okay. Miss Irvin's a yay. She just, the screen's not working on hers, or the touch screen. All right. Operations, low bid purchases, anything? Okay. While we're under operations, I want to just share a little information. Somehow, Mr. Pearman and I have become good friends with a lot of the folks wanting to build houses in Murray County. I have been asked, and I have been working with Mr. Pearman. I've been speaking to some of the planning commission meetings. I've seen my name in the paper a couple times. Thank you, Ms. Bartlett. I want to make it clear that as you have these conversations, and as I have these conversations, I reiterate every time, the school board does not take a stance on whether a development is should be approved or not approved. That's not a school board decision. They could approve every house that's on the agenda, and we still have to educate those children. What I'm doing on behalf of the school board is letting all the folks, the planning commission, the developers, and everyone know where we stand capacity-wise, where we stand with the funding mechanisms that we have in place. And I have also been asking each of the developing groups that I've talked to brainstorm and research any alternative funding sources that they may have seen work in other places. So just as we're having those conversations, I don't want you to think I'm out doing some Lone Ranger stuff, but I have been asked, and I've coordinated with Mr. Pearman because he's been able to go to many of those meetings, and you know, there's been some hot button issues with developments lately. And I think the school's voice needs to be heard, because I don't think that's always been the case over the last years. So that's what we're working on. I just want to give that update. Thank Mr. Pearman, Ms. Ventura, everybody at the central office who has contributed to that. And hopefully we'll have some new updates coming in the future on those. Policies next, and we have pulled the discipline policies out. I'll let y'all address some of the concerns that have been shared. And I will preface this by saying I received quite a few emails regarding some of the policies that were proposed, some clarifying issues, maybe some misunderstandings, some things that may need to be changed. So that's why this was pulled, and this is why Mr. Ritchie is now turning on his microphone.
Thank you. And I suppose we can go ahead and start with policy 6.300. That seems to be the bulk of everything, the student code of conduct. And understand, I am completely open to rearranging anything that's in the student code of conduct in terms of the order or the level, anything of that nature. But the gist of the student code of conduct is actually to give administrators in the schools more autonomy in how they handle the discipline within their building. And then those other additional policies that we can go through actually reinforce the student code of conduct. Keep in mind, too, that the student code of conduct's been streamlined, for lack of a better word, in order to make it more user-friendly for students in the sense that the student code of conduct has to be displayed in every school building throughout the school. So my intent is to get this on a large poster through the teacher center so that it can be displayed throughout each school. And then I know some of the feedback that I've received, there have been some concerns about maybe some vocabulary definitions should be included. I totally agree with you on that. However, I don't think the definition should be in the Code of Conduct itself, but I do think that the definition should be in the parent-student handbook, which is online, and that can be added to that along with the student code of conduct. But we could double the size of this poster, and you know, students don't spend a lot of time reading in between class changes and things. So to minimize the size of it, we can definitely put that in the student handbook, the MCPS parent-student handbook. That's no problem. I would, also based on some of the other feedback that I've received, seems like there's been a hang-up on the level 200 for the inappropriate touching, and then it references, let me find it here. Where it references the teacher or student. My thought is what we could do on that, and it's entirely up to the board, I'm completely open. If you refer to the Trauma-Informed Code of Behavior and Discipline, the original one that we utilized this year, the horseplay physical contact is level 200. So what we could do is leave that there and then move the inappropriate physical contact for student, teacher, move it to a 300 offense. And keep in mind, when we're dealing with youngsters, K through 12, everything's a learning process. And what might be appropriate at the elementary level definitely cannot be appropriate at the high school level. And then when you throw in middle school, that's that transition period where minds are developing, there's conflicting messages from social media, mainstream media, everything. So to try to fine-tune that, it can be difficult when you're educating youngsters. It really can be. But if we can create a student code of conduct that allows that flexibility for administrators to make those decisions, I think that can be beneficial. Yes, we do want to protect teachers, staff, things of that nature. The state is very, very clear as it pertains to zero-tolerance offenses. There are only 3 zero-tolerance offenses, and that's for possession or use of drugs, bringing a firearm to school, and, of course, assault on staff member that results in bodily injury. So they're very clear on that, so we have to be careful about that. But keep in mind, for the student code of conduct, a level 400 is sexual misconduct. So if that inappropriate touching crosses that line to where, hey, this is sexual in nature, after an investigation, things of that nature, then you're looking at a 400 offense, and an administrator has the autonomy to implement a change of placement similar to what would take place under a zero-tolerance offense. So there's a lot of flexibility there. I think those are the primary hang-ups with the proposed student code of conduct. I do know there might have been some confusion on the threat. Let me refer to it real quick. the victimization of any student, harassment, sexual, racial, ethnic, religious, bullying, cyberbullying, and or hazing. Once again, at the elementary level, some of those children have no idea what's coming out of their mouth. They don't understand what they're saying. So things have to be looked at there in a different way than, say, a high school student who is obviously just being mean, for lack of a better word. Then those consequences need to be dealt with. So we're just offering some flexibility there, but I am completely open to shifting any of those if it be the will of the board. Just let me know. Any other discussion on policy 6.300 as it pertains to the code of conduct?
You kind of touched on one of my questions, is just the word itself, victimization, has kind of a wide connotation to it. If that could, I know you said that would be some things that would be defined a little more clearly in a handbook, but maybe even within the policy, that clarification just on that point itself would be helpful for me, because if I hear that a student is being sexually harassed, that has quite a different connotation in my mind than just a verbal interaction. So maybe just some of those clarifications may be something to take a look at. Ms. Kinzer.
Just briefly, I would like to see the inappropriate physical contact with students or staff be a level 3. So after all, you also have threats to others, including staff. So a threat absolutely should be a level 3, but I think physical contact is actual touching or something like that. I think it should be a level 3, and I'd like to see it changed. And I do think the victimization, and I think your point is well taken, that you know, you can't always assume that they're victims in one sense, and maybe there's another word to put there. I have no idea what it is.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, I had quite a few people reach out as well, and I would just say, since this board seems to have still some questions, we probably ought to put this back to the work session, and I feel very uncomfortable making on-the-fly changes to this sitting up here if we could. So if there are going to be changes, if we're not going to accept it as is, then it would be preferable for me to put it back to the work session.
Mr. Lindsay.
I think that's probably the best thing to do. It's just the wording of it. I think there may have been a huge misunderstanding. People only read part of the policy. They tried to turn that into something that it wasn't. According to the emails I got, we got a big crowd watching us tonight, because I got told by numerous people they would be watching me. They're pretty bored tonight if they took time to watch me.
But, you're entertaining.
I guess, but I think if we could maybe work on the wording of that. I get where we're coming from, that there has to be a level of subjectivity that goes along with this. We have to give administrators the autonomy to make the punishment match the crime. And that was exactly what this policy intends to do, and I think that's what this policy does. But if it makes the public feel better to move some words around, then I'm all for that. And I think that maybe that would give a more of a comfort level to some people.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Parker.
I know you mentioned the difference between elementary, middle, and high school. I know when we had dress code before, we had distinctions for elementary, middle, and high school. Is that something that could be considered as a part of this? Because I will just tell you, I think giving it over to administrators, we've lost teachers because of administrators' handling of this situation. And I feel like our goal as a board is to make sure that we're not losing teachers, because we know that as a society we're bleeding teachers, and we're having trouble filling our own positions. So my goal in this is, knowing that that's happened for us, what can we do with this policy to strengthen it so that the teachers feel safe, feel protected, and quite frankly our students too. So I mean, I guess if we need to do something because of, the levels, I'm happy to look at something like that. But I think, I know Ms. Ventura had mentioned that it's going to be subjective because we're dealing with humans, but I think when you start talking about definitions and things like that, it makes it a little bit more objective. So, you don't get into the subjectivity, and I think parents that are reading our policy and our handbook, they need to know what's going on and not try to guess what their administrator's going to do, because I don't think they're going to have that knowledge on the front end.
Right. And looking at some other school districts, when they do try to differentiate between elementary versus high school, let's say middle and high, oftentimes middle and high are lumped together. The offenses read the same, but the consequences can be different. Obviously, for inappropriate touching at the elementary level, maybe ISAS, maybe a behavior plan, that sort of thing. At the high school level, we could look at several days of out-of-school suspension. Depending on the seriousness, or if it's repeated, then you're looking at potential change of placement, obviously. So we could do that. For the consequences, I could differentiate between elementary versus middle and high, maybe, just...
I will just say, too, I think part of it is when we look, a fifth grader is, to me, still, I know it's middle school, but I have a fifth grader, it's still elementary, I think even sixth grade potentially. But seventh and eighth, we have eighth graders that are as tall as teachers that we have in the building, so I think they lean more towards the high school level. I don't know, I'm trying to...
Grade specific more so than...
Probably more so than just the generalization for...
Absolutely.
Especially since we have unit schools, too, that...
Yes.
Ms. Irvin.
To add to what Ms. Parker's saying, I feel like maybe a little bit more lenient on K2, but then, I sometimes feel like I live under a rock and realize that I'm kind of naive compared to some households. It's amazing what children know, even at ages that astound me. So I want to make sure we're not giving this too much of a pass at an appropriate age, because we still want to protect our children. I understand there is an age of innocence, but that age of innocence, unfortunately, is not defined the same from household to household. So just wanted to add that for whatever that's worth.
Thank you. Mr. Howell.
So, looking at this, you can come at this from a law enforcement standpoint, because everything we do here in the confines of this building, that's one way. That's not the only way. Anything that happens to crime can be handled outside of these walls, outside of this property, with the sheriff's department, going through the proper processes and going to the magistrate and filing. So, and that's also an alternative. If something happens and a teacher doesn't feel safe, this isn't the end-all, be-all. This policy is, and honestly, nothing if it's a crime. This policy means nothing at all. It can be handled in other ways. So if a crime has been committed against a teacher, and they don't feel that it's been handled, and they don't feel safe, would you sit at your home and not feel safe? No, you're going to call someone. You're going to file a report. You're going to follow through. You're going to go and make sure that person is prosecuted. And that's something we need to also realize, that this isn't, whatever happens here, it's not the end-all, be-all. There's other ways to handle problems. And furthermore, I have to interpret laws. Do I get those laws interpreted correctly every time? Well, fortunately, I do, personally. But other officers that don't? No, sure, because it's a law. It's a law. And they're written by people who are much up higher than us at a legislative level, and sometimes they get it wrong. And there are bad laws that are written. And so they're either repealed or they're refined. Well, guess what? This policy is not written in stone. We do not have to pull a chisel out and chisel it off and get a whole new slab. We can tweak this, and we need to tweak it, because it's not going to be perfect the first time we get it right. Should it be as close to perfect as possible? Absolutely. But in this, so I've interpreted the law, the judge sees that there's probable cause, there's not probable cause, whatever. It goes on to sentencing. Judges have a sentencing guide. It's carte blanche. It's saying, well, you know, there's some things going into this. Is this child's first offense, or is this their 95th offense? Well, if it's their first offense, they may just get a little slap on their, and something may happen. And that's what I think we're trying to do, is every situation is fact dependent. There is no robot process to handle things. And, you know, if you have little Johnny here who is a terror versus, you know, little Tom here who did one thing, you're going to handle those differently. But beyond that, there's also other factors beyond that. Why is this child a terror and this child isn't? What is there a root problem that we need to look at and identify? I don't know. Now that's different than a crime. We do have the ability to try to figure out what's wrong and maybe move forward and try to fix that, because that's our job, is to educate children. And sometimes if they have bad behavior, is it us that have to do that? Well, it's not supposed to be. That's supposed to be mom and dad's job. But increasingly we're finding out that more and more of these things fall on us as a school system to be that, to fill in. So we're in a good, it's a good start. Do we need to modify some things and tweak some things? Yes. Once we pass this policy, in a month or two or whenever, is it going to be perfect? I would hope so. But if it's not, let's fix it. Let's find out. And if we have administrators who are not doing what they need to do, furthermore, we need to know that. And that's not you. I expect if teachers are having problems with discipline, and they need to notify us so that we can change that. We can figure out maybe if we do create a sentencing guide or whatever, maybe we have something in there that lets us know what happens and doesn't happen. So,
all right. Thank you very much. Sounds like we're kind of giving you a little bit of guidance.
Yes, sir, and I'll bring something back to the work session. Do you want me to briefly go over the other policies as well?
I don't think we probably need to do that tonight. We can cover those at the work session if there's
Sure.
any changes.
Absolutely.
Taking kind of the guidance that we've given on this one, you can kind of extrapolate that out if there's anything that you feel like needs to be added or altered in some of these others.
Yes, sir. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Mr. Lindsay, hang on, don't
sorry.
run.
No, I just want to publicly thank Mr. Ritchie. He's put a ton of work into this. This is a huge undertaking, and I just want to publicly thank you for you know, trying to change this policy. You know, and we won't get it right next time, as Chad said. It may take some tweaking, but I just want to publicly acknowledge how much time and effort you've put into it, and I'm sure others too, but,
yes,
but you specifically. So.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you all.
All right, we're going to move on now to the proposed new MOU. Ms. Kinzer.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve the new MOU. Is there? Ms. Irvin seconds it. All right. Any discussion? I guess, well, Mr. Sims.
I'll just have to say, there's things in here that come at a cost that, for me personally, I will not be supporting the new MOU. I won't get into details because we can't pull the details out. So, but just there are things that I feel like if it were to pass, it would go beyond 3 years. It would be things that we would never, it would continue on, and it does come at a cost, and there's things that I think it would be cost to the kids. That's why I would not be voting for it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howell?
I'd like to know what the costs are, because I know that there's substantial cost in some things, and of course they're subjective, but I'd like to have a ballpark figure. And Doug's not here, so.
Well, he's talking ballpark figures.
He's talking actual ballparks over there.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
But beyond that, I what is the ramifications of, I mean, some of these things are going to, are policies that go beyond things that this board can do. Some of these would actually affect financial management policies. So how would that work? We can't change those policies. Those are not, we're not that board. So I have questions about, Mr. Laconin, what would just a bare bones basic cost of this be on day one? And then number two, how do we reconcile what's in this MOU against financial management policies?
And you know, this is something Jake and I have discussed about, is, you know, when we have something that school board policy, MOU, you know, the financial policies that the school board has, they're run through the financial management board. So I've got policy, I've got the private act, and I've got the MOU. And so I kind of play that dance of which one prevails, and that's usually when I send an email to Jake to say, what do I do? And so we try to line out those to make sure they all line up to where we can actually have some flexibility there, but also still be able to operate. For example, there are payroll procedures. It says in the MOU that you're going to be paid this many times over this amount of time, and you're going to get it before a holiday, you know, things like that. And so it needs to always line up policy with MOU, because we don't want those conflicting. So anytime we're changing, I think there's something in the MOU about changing travel for coaches. That is something that is not in financial policy, that would be a change that we would have to make through the financial management board to start doing that. And the cost associated with that is not able to be estimated, because you don't know how much driving or how much we're going to invest into that program. So. Well, and to further address that, I mean, this board has discussed, you know, buying minivans for schools to what was it? It's not a school bus, it's a team bus. Is that what we just activity bus? So if we did those things, which, I mean, there's a possibility that that's the route we're going to go. So then do we mandate they use those, and then we don't have to worry about mileage? Or, I mean, so then if we mandate they use those, then, I mean, that limits them. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of interesting things in here, and I think that there's some things that we can discuss. I just feel that there's a lot of things in here that there's an unknown cost that we can't determine. So, I mean, I don't know if we're talking, you know, $800,000 or are we talking $4 million. So that's really difficult for me to vote on something when it's an unknown price tag. I'm not big on writing blank checks. I mean, that just doesn't sound like something that we can just financially do. So I think I know there's a lot of work that went into this. I know that there's a lot of information. But I have a lot of questions about some of these things.
I think you had your hand up, and since your name's actually listed over here, I thought I'd let you give us what you had.
Is it just not?
Yeah, it's
okay.
on.
Well, when we met, anything we asked about that had a cost, we contacted Doug's office, and we actually did ask for those costs. Like the maternity leave, we requested the cost of that, and I don't have with me what those costs were, but it didn't seem like a significant cost. And we looked historically at how many teachers took advantage of those things. As far as the additional leave, that those days were a suggestion of the board members, because they questioned whether that was enough, because what was proposed by the teacher side was 1 day for every 10 years. But two, I think when you're talking about not retaining and recruiting high-quality teachers, there's a cost to that too. We've seen that cost, and the cost of that has been the education of our students in Murray County. And I understand the cost of the increased cost of things and not being able to afford those things, but we also are sitting at hefty fund balances over the past 5 years. And years where we thought we wouldn't see revenues, and we did see excessive revenue. So I think that sometimes you have to balance, the concern of everybody deciding they're going to, take all the personal time in the world, even though when you really look at people who are taking personal time, they're not. And most people don't take advantage of that. But also the results of the survey where our teachers are suffering mental health with mental health and emotional exhaustion and physical exhaustion, and that was a way to give back to them at a minimal cost. So that's where we sit on that, but we did ask Doug each time that there was a cost associated to something, how much that cost was. And at no time did it seem like a huge, millions and millions of dollars. And of course it would depend each year on how many days somebody took. And it would depend, if there's a cost associated to buy a team activity bus, and gas prices, but at the same time, is it fair to pass that on to a coach when their stipend for the coaching would barely cover the gas price for driving back and forth to Summertown or to the schools almost in Alabama, at $4.50 a gallon? So.
Yeah, so, and that's, so several of these things we've addressed by policy. The day, you mentioned the extra days off. We can change that in policy, and I believe we're looking at that. So, I mean, to me, like I said, and maybe individually, this is a, 31-page document. Individually, if I ask him a question about one thing, and, well, that's not that much. Well, it's $100,000. Okay, well, and then I ask him, but there's 31 pages of things, and 100,000 here, and 100,000 there, and 50,000 there, and 400,000 there. Through 31 pages, all of a sudden, it's not much, but collectively, we're not voting on these individually. We're voting on as a lump sum omnibus, and so in doing so, it adds up. It adds up really quickly, and so that's my concern, is not knowing what those additions are. Furthermore, we're moving forward in great strides, I feel, with our pay, and I just kind of feel like this kind of jeopardizes what's going to happen next year, because we've just said our budget surpluses are potentially coming to an end. We don't want to have a budget surplus. We want to budget our revenue where our expenses are, and that's the way we should be doing it. Unfortunately, we can't do that because the county commission won't do that for us. So, this may have unintended costs that we may not be able to carry forward, and I just don't know what those costs are exactly. And not knowing that, it would be hard for me to not know to vote for that.
Thank you. Ms. Kinzer.
I just want to remind this board that this was a joint together. They met over a period of almost 3 months. It was one of my understanding from what I've been told is it was one of the best collaborative conferences they had. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of understanding of the problems that teachers have, and the whole thing that they really stressed is how we can recruit and retain teachers, okay? I understand, and I wasn't on the committee, that some of the suggestions that you're talking about came from our side, from the board. correct? Right, right. And you all agree with this, and you check with him, and actually, a while ago, when he was talking about the potential cost from the MOU, you weren't particularly concerned about that, other than not being able to put a specific number on the travel. I can understand that, but whatever. I would hate for this board, after all the work that both sides have done, to come together with a document that the teachers can see the support we have of them, and they have faith in us, that we would vote this down. So I would urge you to vote for it.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
I was just going to say, I've sat on 3 of these so far, and as I've said before, I've always encouraged other board members, if you have the opportunity, because it is an enlightening experience to kind of sit where we're not up here and teachers are over there, to sit down and as a group discuss these things. I will say that I won't be supporting this, and I'll say why. From what I've seen, from what I'm aware of, there are less than 30 districts in the state of Tennessee out of over 140 that still have an MOU in place. And I think that, having seen what has happened in the past, when we can provide protections for our staff and give them, and again, this has nothing to do with specifics in the individual MOU, but I think we can handle all this, and people that have been in the meetings know I've said over and over again about, I think we can handle this in policy and with procedures. And I think we've shown through our recent actions, and not just our actions, but I think this board in general has, in some ways, turned a page into making sure that we're continually, not just in pay and not just in other decisions, that we're respecting that our staff, and I say that intentionally because I do mean all staff, are treated fairly and equally as we move ahead. And I'm uncomfortable with tying this back into an MOU that in some ways carves out specific staff members differently than other staff members. And I know that's historically the way things have been done, but again, I will say that I firmly believe we can offer all of our staff the protections they need and offer them benefits and any other things that this board can offer those within policies and procedures.
Ms. Irvin.
So I was also on that collaborative team, and unfortunately I did not get to meet, I think, the last time or two, I believe, so I didn't get the whole conclusion of it. But for the things that are hot topics tonight, I do believe I was there and sat through and even countered. So one thing I do know is it was proposed to do 8 weeks of maternity leave, and that went back and forth, and we settled at 4 weeks. And I was the one who probably had the hardest time with the 8 weeks. And what I was told from our human resource team is that is a benefit that's now being given at other districts. And I thought, I don't know what other districts are doing. Some are, some are not. But if 4 weeks, if that gives a parent 4 weeks to have that bonding time with their child, and that's something that we can do that maybe the majority around us are not, that, in my opinion, equated to 1 month of pay. Is that kind of that's 4 weeks, 1 month of pay. So you would have to look at everybody that goes out on maternity leave to get the estimated cost of that. But I think we ran numbers, and I'm thinking we thought it really wasn't that crazy. I'm thinking it was like, what'd you say? Yeah, I'm thinking it was less than 150,000. We thought that would impact us annually. Doug probably has a better number on that estimate. And I want to say more. I can turn it off.
So the estimated cost is about $13,878 per occurrence. So at any time that happens, you're looking at $13,878. How much baby making is going to occur? How do I estimate for that? You know what? During COVID, that'd have been pretty costly. I feel like there was a lot of babies made during COVID.
Not by teachers.
But anyways, I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm not afraid. So there it is, $13,878 per baby making experience. That's your district cost. The other cost that I haven't really calculated because I really wasn't asked. It is really the local leave. I've done a calculation for if we doubled our sick time cost, which this local leave would roll into sick if unused. And really that just depends. We've got a good chunk of employees that have been here more than 8 years that would qualify for the local leave that's being proposed in the MOU. And with those carrying over, if they use those days and they can use them, as personal time, additional personal time, it's your cost of that employee being out, making sure that person's paid, and then also filling a sub for that day. How much of that is going to be used? Once again, you don't really know. You hope that people use it because, it is supposed to give them a break from the struggle that is, being employed. But in addition to that, it also has tiers in which you earn local leave. So we could calculate the exact cost of that, but the cost is different if they decide not to use it. It turns into a $50 per day cost payout when they retire, or that cost is actually a little bit greater if they use it during the year because your average cost is a little over $200 you're going to pay for someone to not be there, in addition to pay for the sub to take that position there. So that's kind of the cost you're looking at, and some of those I can throw an estimated number, but that's all it would be in that case.
So I'll be honest, that 13,800 sounds I'm not doubting you, but that sounds a little high to me for 4 weeks. That was for 8, because it was actually for 4 that we.
Yeah, so it would be 6,936 for half of that.
And that's what is in the MOU. So just to clarify, that is a difference. And the reason why, which I don't remember who brought it up. I believe it was this side who brought it up. Adding days to our experienced teachers, and the reason why is we were hopeful to try to keep our experience here instead of driving them out elsewhere. We don't want them to have reasons to look for other employment. We want them to stay here. And I'll be honest with you, my whole hope with this MOU, I want to attract the best, and if the more we can attract, that gives us the ability to staff the best in Murray County. So that is my hope for it. If I have to be completely honest, the only thing I do not like about the MOU is the 3-year lockdown date. But I do have faith that our teachers, I think times are changing, employment's getting harder. It's hard for anybody to have employees, and the more we can do to attract the best, I support that. So I think I'll be voting for it just as a good faith to support our teachers and let them know.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm sorry, but if it does pass, I will state again, I do want this communicated, what is inside of the MOU. It needs to be like on a golden banner to everybody we try to attract here. Because I know in times past, I have even temporarily worked for the school system in the past and had no clue that the MOU was even there and what it defines. So the intent is to attract and to keep. But we'll see how it happens.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lindsay.
I'll be blunt and quick. I have no intention of voting for this. I'm more than happy to take these concerns that have been brought forth and address them in policy. If I have to vote for this as a whole, which I do, I'll be voting no against it. There's some changes I like, some I don't. But the biggest problem I have, and Mr. Moore said this a few minutes ago, is I have no interest in separating one group of employees away from another group of employees. If some of these benefits and some of these changes are needed and wanted by this board, more than happy to do that. But that needs to go into policy where everybody can take advantage of that and not just one group of employees.
Go ahead.
And I would agree with that. If it weren't for the law that prevented us from fighting for the staff, that we can't do that, I'm all for that. Like, my EAs are gold to me. I don't disagree with you, but that is unfortunately the limitation to what the MOU does. But also, if we can recruit highly qualified teachers and keep the best teachers, we will recruit the best staff. We will be able to be one of the top school districts, which is the goal, to provide the best thing for our students, to provide the best for the students in Murray County. That's what the goal is.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Parker.
I will just say, during the time that I've been on the board, and we've had, I think, 2 MOUs come before me since I've been on there, not counting this one, and we've approved them. One of them took a little bit longer to get there, but my concern has always been that I felt like it tied our hands in certain areas that we wanted to look at down the road. And when we hear stats like there's only 30 in the entire state, and this is going to be what helps us attract more, more teachers, better teachers. We've had an MOU in place, and we're still having those problems. So I don't necessarily know that I see the correlation between it. Like Mr. Lindsay said, I would be happy to look at this in policy. I know the year that we had issues with the MOU, we adopted all of those items in policy, and it still wasn't enough. And it still, we still had to have a lawsuit over it, and we had to, we had to go through all that, and we did end up eventually adopting the MOU, but I didn't feel like anything changed after that MOU. So I'm just looking at it. I'm rolling off, and I hate to handcuff somebody for the next 3 years on things that they may see or they may hear from their constituents and that they are not even aware of right now, sitting out there and running for this position, that then have to operate with one hand tied behind their back in certain instances based on something that they had no participation in. That's my biggest concern.
Okay, thank you. I do not see any other lights.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes,
just in
go
response
ahead.
to that? The other part of that is that the previous MOU didn't have anything beyond what the state law really required extra for teachers. And that's the benefit from this MOU, is that it does offer a few extra things for teachers to keep them. And, and I know we can sit here and say we can put that in policy. We can also try to provide a 3% raise for teachers every year, but that didn't happen for years. And that was in the MOU. So, and I don't want to get in a back and forth. I just think that this is such a valuable piece to the employees. And also, historically in Murray County, whatever we did for teachers, we did for employees, for the staff. Except this year, the step raises for teachers are 1.6%, but the step raises for classified staff are 3%. So, I don't think it prevents anybody from getting better opportunities. It doesn't say you can't do this for staff members because we do it for teachers. It says this is what we're offering teachers. This is what we're offering teachers in Murray County. Come here. You can earn 1 extra personal day for the first 8 years, 2 if you stay 15. And hey, if you're already here and you're over 20, you get 3 extra personal days, which doesn't cost the district a whole lot of money.
All right.
But we sure appreciate your service.
Okay, thank you very much for that information. I do not see any other lights, so I will take that as a sign that we can go ahead and vote on the MOU. Please vote no. 6-3, that does not pass. What does that, where does that leave us now in this process, Mr. Wolver?
It's no action. A board member could bring it back at a later date, but no action's been taken. If the committee wants to meet again, it could do that. That's completely up to you all.
One thing that I have heard repeatedly tonight is that how much of this could be handled through policy. I think that may be what we start looking at, is how to include what we've included with the, because a lot of work did go into this and a lot of collaboration went into this, and I don't want that to fall by the wayside. So if there is a way that we can incorporate this into policy. And I don't know if that falls into your court or where that goes next. If we could take a look at how to incorporate that, I think we're throwing a lot of stuff at the next work session, but it would be either the next work session or the next. I would be fine with that. Let's do it at the August work session. We're in June now, so do it the... Oh, yeah, we do. We're the first part of June. The July work session. Okay. Yeah, see, that, and that's what throws me off. Yeah. All right, so yes, not this coming work session in 2 weeks, but the following in 6 weeks. Yeah. Mr. Howell?
And looking at the coaches, the mileage, everything, we just passed $2.5 million for athletic spending, and in that capital projects prioritization, at the bottom, options for other consideration, $1.357 million for activity buses. So, and I'm not saying we're going to spend $1.357 million, but that's there. So we're looking at that. You know, and coaches' stipends, I know Mr. Pointer has worked on those as well. So I mean, it's not perfect. Coaching stipends not, and I know that's not. Coaches driving, trust me, my kids are involved in sports in Murray County Public Schools, and I see what the coaches do, and I know what the coaches do, and I know that they drive themselves. So I mean, it is something that we are looking at, and we do want to make sure that we're being fair and equitable across the board with that. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lindsey.
Just my opinion, but I think if an individual board member wants to explore some change in policy, some addition, using the information we've been given through the MOU, that they should reach out to Ms. Gerard, and they, I'm sure she'd be more than willing to help present and come up with something. But I think that should initiate with us. I don't think it's unfair to put her in that position.
Well, and that's why I wanted to put it at the work session so that we could start having that planning conversation. I didn't mean for you to bring us a list of policies based around this at that work session.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if there were particular policies you wanted worked on now for then, or if you're going to...
No, I think, I think that's just the time that we can start this discussion on how we want to go ahead and incorporate that in.
Oh, okay, then I'm fine with it at the June one. I thought you meant, like, please present all these policies. That was not going to happen in the next 2 weeks, sorry.
Let's start the conversation at the June work session, because then that may push some things into the July session we need to work on. All right, let's do that then. But I do want to reiterate that this took a lot of collaboration, a lot of time, and a lot of hard work, and it was a very positive experience. So I don't want to lose that piece of it from this discussion and from what we can do for our teachers. Okay. And all employees, yes, thank you for reminding me of that. One last announcement that I'd like to make is we have all been invited as school board members and as the community at large. You're all invited to this. What's Russ Adcock's church? Murray Hills Church is organizing a Justice Journey bus trip, and he has encouraged all school board members to take part in that. It is July 20th and 21st. It will be a trip to Birmingham, Montgomery, Tuskegee, and Selma, Alabama, to explore the civil rights history that's going on down there and how we can incorporate that into our leadership within the community, and as we lead all folks and all people, make us a little more unified in that regard. There is a cost to it. I can forward you the email, and I'm sure Pastor Adcox would be happy to have as many of us as possible take part in that. So I wanted to make that known as well. Any other discussions? Seeing none, we will accept a motion to adjourn, and everybody in favor stand up and head out the door. I know.